Hello and welcome to Murder Analysed. I'm Christina Moore. Before I get into today's case, I think people have reminded me that sometimes, well most of the time now, we have lots of new viewers to this channel, and I forget that. And you're all over the world, and I think it's amazing, and I want to thank you for that. And hello to Ireland. I've had a lot of messages from Ireland, and being half Irish, I like to see that Ireland's watching, so thanks for that. Also the Philippines, Germany, Italy, Switzerland. So I thought before I go into the video, I should sort of just give you a general update on what we do at Murder Analysed. We analyse crimes, and I try murder crimes, and I try to do them justice. So I try to tell the whole story, no matter how bad they are. So in our videos, in probably all of our videos, there is content that some viewers will find really upsetting. So there's always usually either a warning put out about that, but that's generally what we do. I don't like to just talk about the crime itself. I like to talk about the victims if I can. I like to talk about the perpetrator's background to see if we can understand why. Because I think we all know murders go on, but a lot of us always seem to think, why would people do what they do? So listen, I don't know everything, and you know, sometimes there is nothing in these perpetrators' background that would make them do what they do, but I try and give it a good go so that you can make up your own mind about each of these cases. So lovely to see you all, and welcome to Murder Analysed if you're new to this channel. Also, we've had a lot of people commenting, and I got a lovely comment actually from someone, and they said, you know, you do a lot of serial killers, but they're all men, and paedophiles, and they're all men. Throw some women in there. So, you know, and it's not just for you, but I'm glad that you brought it up. They was on my list, but I'm going to bring them in a bit earlier now. So, coming up shortly, over the next few weeks, there's going to be a lot of women serial killers, and also women paedophiles. So that's enough about the background. Now let's move on to the case of today. Now the case today is called the Baby P murder. This case is a disturbing case. There's cases within this case. So we have now a child of 17-month-old who was abused, physically, not sexually, physically abused, tortured and murdered in around about an 8-month period. And he died, I think, on the 3rd of August 2007. And so we're going to look at that case today. So if you do not like this case, don't watch it. The reason this case is called Baby P, and the reason why I continue over the years to have called him Baby P, is because when he was murdered, there was another trial coming up for the same perpetrators. And so to make sure, I think, that none of these trials were lost, and these people had to serve justice, really, or justice was served. They had to be punished for what they did. The court ordered that their names wouldn't be released. So baby Peter, or Peter Connelly's name, couldn't be released because it would have automatically linked them perpetrators to their next crime. And then when it had gone to court, these perpetrators may not have got, or what their defence team was going to say, wouldn't have got a fair trial, and they may then have got off with this murder, and also then the rape of a 2-year-old girl. So in this case, it is disturbing. So again, you know, we're going to talk about, I don't go into so much detail, but I am going to say about Baby P's injuries. I'm going to describe how the child, the 2-year-old child, and actually this 2-year-old child, this victim of these people, was the first child in England to give evidence. and was cross-examined. And so I'm going to talk about how she described her abuse, because at the time when this went to trial, this child was 3.5. So we're also going to look in this case at the failings of how this child came in this situation for all these months when he was already under social services, and he was under the London Borough of Haringey Children's Services, and also the National Health now, a doctor with the National Health at the hospital also comes into question here, how this child was missed, even though there was clear signs, people knew what was going on in these services, but did nothing really. And so it's about the failing of that. We also then look at the background of all the perpetrators, and I'll leave it then up to you to make up your minds about what sort of people these are. So on the 3rd of August 2007 in Tottenham, London, in a blood-stained cot in an upstairs bedroom of a dilapidated, semi-detached house in Tottenham, a body of baby P was found. His mother had rang the police and the ambulance, and they took him then to hospital. And I'm going to now go back about 8 months before that date and to talk about what really happened to baby P as we now know it. So 8 months before baby P's death, Peter Connelly's death, this 17-month-old baby. So at the time when this started, he was a year, 11 months old at the time. Healthy child, and I'll show you the comparisons of how he looked then and how he had deteriorated within them 8 months. Tracy Connolly, the mother, she was I think 28 at the time when this occurred. She had Peter, or baby P, and he had 3 siblings. I think he was the youngest of the 3. And the other, his siblings were all girls, so he was the 4th child. She had been in a relationship with someone, and he was very good, and the father of baby P. But that relationship broke down. But he still had a lot to do with these children. And he was actually the one at first that called social services on Tracy, because he could see that these children wasn't being looked after. Their house was terrible. They were, I don't think ill-treated at that time, but Tracy was a bit of a drinker. Tracy used to like to go out, or if she didn't go out, she'd spend all day on Facebook, on other social media sites, and her children, young children, a year old, were left to their own devices. So he rang, the ex-husband rang social services to say he felt that his children were in danger. So now we have baby P, and I think he was born in 2006, 1st of March 2006. Now subject or under social services because of reports by the husband or the ex. They got involved, and she was under them, and they was watching her and going around and visiting her, and she was having these courses they do, to help you cope with situations. And a lot of people who have relationships that end do sometimes find it difficult to even get out of bed. It can affect someone that much. But I think this with Tracy Connolly was just the way she was. I don't think she understood that you need to get up in the morning and look after your children. She was quite happy to lay in bed till 11 o'clock and be up till 2 o'clock in the morning and she seemed to live her own life even though she had these 4 children. So there was real concerns here. So in 2007, after this GP had seen bruises on his chest and his face, she was arrested for that. And at the time it was thought that she was the only one in this house. The child, baby P, was taken into care at that time, or put into the care of a family friend, but was returned home to the mother in January 2007, because what she was doing, this Tracy Connolly, was lying. She hadn't told social services that she had people living with her, and especially these people, when you find out what about these people later on, you'll understand why. She hid it from everyone. She told her mother and she told other people not to say they were living there. So all of a sudden this child's now been returned home because she's doing her courses. She's telling the social services what they want to hear, and let's be honest, the social services, even at this point, really had let this child down, because at this point you had the social services going into Tracy Connolly's house to see baby P, to look at the state of this house, really, and do nothing, not help her do nothing with all these courses that she had done to be a good mother, to, take care of her child. When the social services, and this is just one time that we know about, when the social services went in to Tracy Connolly's property, baby P was sitting in a pushchair, and his face and chest and mouth all round here was covered in chocolate. Now they left, social worker included, and Tracy Connolly left baby P in the hallway while they went and had a chat about the boy. No one asked Tracy Connolly to wipe that boy's face, because we'd already known that this boy had had bruises on his chest and his face. It was already noted. That's why she was under social services. The social worker didn't check that child at all. She had a little chat. Now, social services and a social worker, and if you're a child social worker, you are not there for the mother. She would have her own social worker if she needed it. You are there for the protection of a child. And this is when this whole case starts to fail. And this is what makes this case so bad, because this child was then continued to be abused physically and tortured until the day of his death, because of these people found him. So we're now talking about a couple of months that have gone by. Peter Connelly, baby P, has now been admitted 2 more times to a hospital. 2 more times. He had bruising and scratches, swelling on the side of his head, and again Connolly then was arrested again in May 2007. A couple of months. In June 2007, a social worker observed marks on Peter and informed again the police, because this girl was still allowed to keep this child because she was accordingly, working with the social services and they were protecting this child. It just gets worse, this case. So a medical examiner then does say, I think in June 2007, that it is a result of child abuse. So again, on the 4th of June, baby Peter was placed with a friend for safeguarding. Now this is where the failings really start to get bad here. So on the 25th of July 2007, Haringey Council and Children and Young People Services obtained legal advice. So they'd done that. They'd gone to got the legal advice on which indicated the threshold of when you can remove a child from its mother or from the family home for protection. But the initial, as it seems on paper at first, that this threshold wasn't met. So again, the child was left in this home, and later on, when we find out why this threshold wasn't met, again, it was a lack of services, of the social services in this case. Because to take a child from its mother, you have to have evidence. And if no one bothers turning up to these hearings, they have no option but to allow this child to go back home. But we'll talk more about that as we go through. So on the 1st of August 2007, baby P was again seen at St Anne's Hospital in North London by a locum paediatrician, Dr. Sabir Al-Zayyat. Serious injuries to this child, this boy had by this time, over 60 serious injuries. How this child had even survived the 8 months of this abuse, I do not know. So this finally, as they've seen a paediatrician, and you think this is it. This is where this boy can be saved. And at that point, this boy could have been saved. This is now 2 days before he died. So this doctor, this paediatrician, and I don't even like to call her a paediatrician because it's shocking. Serious injuries including a broken back, which they think either happened on that day or on the day of his death. But what he did have was broken ribs and injuries to his face and everything. And I'm going to go into more of his details. But this doctor, this paediatrician, knowing the history of baby P, because it's their duty to know, you know, there's notes that's kept and they're shared notes. And the reason they're shared is because anyone that's looking at this case, when you're under social services, it's easier then for you to pick up danger signs. Either this doctor didn't even bother reading them or didn't take it serious enough. But this boy must have been in terrible, terrible pain. And what she wrote down was that he's cranky. For some reason, he's cranky. You know, this is after she examined this boy. Well, she really didn't examine this boy, because you can tell if a child's got broken ribs. He had bruises, cuts. His ear was black. He's just had so many injuries to his body. You know, 60 injuries. And we know there is at that point that he had them injuries, because when he was under autopsy after he died, it was found out these were old injuries. So this is what this doctor, this so-called paediatrician, had missed and sent this boy home to his death. So anytime when you're under social services and you visit a hospital, it flags up and it goes straight to the social services. So the social services has looked at this doctor's note. He's a bit cranky. Nothing about any illness at all. Any injuries at all were in this doctor's notes. So they've informed Connolly the next day that she would not be prosecuted and that it was literally, you know, just he was feeling cranky. So now we get to the 3rd of August 2007. So now we know that baby P had been in hospital. He'd been seen by paediatricians, by GPs, and the GPs had done their job. The social services had not really done their job because she had at the time living with her without telling anyone, and she asked people to lie for her, and they did, even though they must have seen the deterioration of this child over these months. She was allowing to live in her property a man called Stephen Barker, 33-year-old, who had been her boyfriend for the past 8 months since this abuse and torture on baby P had started. His brother then, Jason Owen, 36, had also moved in with his 15-year-old girlfriend. Now, Jason Owen was on the run because, you know, he was in a relationship with a 15-year-old and they were hiding out in Connolly's house. And Connolly was keeping this secret from everybody, or trying to. But the people that knew her, the people that really, and I would say even the mother knew, but she told her not to say, so she didn't. But there's a lot of people have a lot to answer for, I think, in this case. So the social services, as I said, visited. She had her little, courses that they do, but it was one big lie after another with Tracy Connolly. Now, Tracy Connolly would leave Stephen Barker to look after this child, and to tell the truth, Tracy Connolly didn't care whether he was abusing this child or not. She was there. She was either on the computer, out getting drunk, no care for these children at all, especially baby P. So now, the day of the murder, or the day leading up to the murder, because this boy being found in his cot, dead, he was blue, bruised, internal bleeding and everything else was going on with this child. The mother rings an ambulance, and she said, well, I think it's because I sort of neglected him, I didn't get up till 11, as if that's was going to cause the illness and the actual injuries to this child. But this was 12:30 p.m. when these ambulance people arrived at the property, and they tried to resuscitate baby P. He was taken to North Middlesex Hospital, and his mother, with his mother, so she even went to this hospital. I think because she's got away with it so many times before, she probably thought she could talk her way out of this one as well. But he was pronounced dead shortly after arriving. The post-mortem revealed that not only had he had broken ribs, broken backs and everything else he'd been punched quite recently, probably within the 2 days of being released out and back to her care, punched into the face, and he'd lost one of his teeth, and they knew he lost his tooth because they found it in his stomach under post-mortem. Again, as I said, they found about 60 injuries to this child's body. Face, torso. His fingernails had been pulled out. His fingers were black and bruised, and this is where he'd been tortured. He had gashes to his head. He had a fractured shin bone. He had a ripped ear. His toes were black, and also his thumbnails had been took from his toes. His skin was torn from his nose. He had and his mouth. He had cuts on his neck, and that's just a few of the things. Now, the broken back, they don't know if that happened before the paediatrician looked in 2 days prior or at the time of his death, but this boy also had internal bleeding. He was bleeding probably, and that's in the end what killed him. So this 8 months of, and I'm going to say torture because that's what it was, of this child. So all these injuries, all this abuse, all this torture, this murder was done to this child in an 8-month period while he was under social services and the social services of Haringey. Now, Haringey had already come under a lot of criticism for previous cases. I think Victoria Climbié case was one of them, so they should have been more on it. But they tried to hide this report about what really happened here, and it's shocking, really. No one would want this report out in the public if you're an organisation like this, because it showed here that when, as I said previously, when they went then to get the order to remove this child from the home, nobody from the social services turned up. There was meetings held about safeguarding meetings, and no one from the social services turned up with regards to baby P. This baby didn't have a chance. It didn't have a chance because it had a mother that didn't care. She'd allowed her boyfriend, his brother, who was very sadistic, and we're going to get to him in a minute, to do this to this child, and sometimes in front of her. She was part of this. Plus now, you've got now this child's died, and a terrible death this would have been. So I think now we should go on to the sentencing. And again, you're probably not going to like this either. On the 11th of November 2008, Jason Owen, 36, and Stephen Barker, I think 32 or 33 was at the time, he's the younger brother of Jason Owen, were found guilty of causing or allowing the death of a vulnerable person. Tracy Connolly, 27, had already pleaded guilty at the time of the charge. So earlier in the year, or earlier in the trial, Jason Owen and Tracy Connolly had been cleared of the murder because of insufficient evidence, and Stephen Barker was found not guilty of murder by a jury. I know, it's shocking, but I've said before, when we talk about a murder trial or a murder case, we have actus reus and mens rea that have to be met. Was the intent to kill there? Was the action done? Now you have 3 people that live in this property, but no one knew it. There was no evidence of Stephen Barker in this property. There was no evidence of Jason Owen or the 15-year-old girlfriend living in this property. Not really, because Tracy Connolly had continued to say throughout the time under social services this lie to keep this, her lover, as she calls him, in her life. So it was difficult to prove without a reasonable doubt of who done this, or did anyone else do it. So murder is so difficult to prove, and so is manslaughter. So I think what happened was the judge really, and the jury, you can't make them, even though you want to, it'd be lovely to think that they all got murdered and they'd all gone away, because they all bloody did it. They're all of them, all 3 of these people killed this child through neglect, through abuse, and through torture. Killed this child, but legally it was difficult to prove. So they were found guilty on causing and allowing the death of a child, which still holds a sentence, but not a lot. I can't tell you yet the sentences they got, because as I said at the beginning, there's a second trial that was taking part at the same time, and this is why baby P's identity couldn't be let out to the press. The press were warned, and there was orders going out that they could not release his name or any name in connection with this case until the other case that was coming up was concluded, for fear that they would lose all the cases, because of the media and stuff, which would have then give the defence the ability to say it was an unfair trial and it would have been biased. So there's a lot about this case really. But let's have a look at this aftermath of this Haringey Council, because they deserve a mention for how badly they had done. There was a serious case review after the death, and only a summary really was released to the public, because again, public outcry into, we fund these again from our taxes, these agencies. We rely on these agencies to help protect our children, especially in this sort of cases, and also our paediatricians and our NHS And you know, NHS in this country is amazing, but this one doctor, really for many years, you know, it made you think, did they actually know what they was doing? But the NHS is an amazing organisation. This was just one bad apple in very many of great nurses and doctors throughout our NHS. So I think the Mail on Sunday, they reported on about the 15th of March 2009 about the details of this a serious case for review. It was leaked out actually, and that's where we then found out that they didn't attend certain meetings. They didn't attend then. There was a lot of breaches where they should have then been able to get an order if you're not going to turn up and produce your evidence about the mother's ability to take care or not take care of her child. Then if there's no evidence the child was returned home. So there's a lot then come out. And so literally there was a lot of people lost their jobs here, a lot of people deservedly lost their jobs here and shouldn't be working with children at all, because working in the defence of children and to keep a child safe can't be about the money. You have to care for what you're doing, and obviously these people didn't care, and that doctor no longer, or this paediatrician no longer practices or works at the NHS anymore. And after this case and really the slating that she got, I don't think anyone anywhere would employ this woman. Now let's talk about the second rape trial. Now remember I said that we had Tracy Connolly that was allowing Stephen Barker to live in her property with her and her children. This man was then up on this rape charge, and the child can't be named because she was young. She was 2 at the time of the rape, and it was that trial took place in 2009, and they faced charges though under aliases, because remember the courts, no one wanted this man to get away with this. So the judge and the courts done everything they could, and they meant it when they said that they had anonymity until the end of this trial. Nothing could be mentioned. They were very strict on that, and no one could mention a thing, because they needed to get this man off the streets, and they knew it. So this was a 2-year-old child, and the trial took place, I think, in 2009, and on trial for that rape was Tracy Connolly and Stephen Barker. The girl again was also under Haringey child protection register. Again, another failing in these cases. Tracy Connolly was alongside Barker in the dock, and they were accused of cruelty after it was alleged that she witnessed this rape but did nothing to stop it. Stephen Barker was found guilty of the rape, while Connolly was found not guilty of child cruelty charges. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how. And I am going to put the citation in this case up in the notes, because this is worth a read, this case, because there's a lot more than what I can say about it. This girl just keeps getting away with it, doesn't she? She does. And don't forget, this was a trial by jury. So now this is over, this case, now it can be released out. We've now got the whole story of Baby P. We've now got everything going on in this case, including that this rape of this child when she was 2-year-old went into court at 3.5-year-old, and was the first child ever to be cross-examined and give evidence about this rape. Now it's different to what we would think a normal court would be when you're dealing with children. For one, they're not in the court, they're on cameras and stuff like that. But also, you're not wearing your wigs, you're not going to intimidate this child. But this child still had to be cross-examined to get the verdict in. And how she described how she was raped was that he would make her lay on the floor, and she explained to the court how he would lay on top of her like a mermaid, but it would hurt her. So, you know, give her that. She did it, and he got then convicted of this rape on that evidence of a 3.5-year-old child. So I think the sentence for both trials started and took place, I think, actually on the 22nd of May 2009 at the Old Bailey. Now, Tracy Connolly received a sentence of imprisonment for public protection and ordering to be indefinitely imprisoned until deemed that she was no longer of risk in public, or especially to small children. And she had a minimum of 5 years put on that. So really, all right, she got off with the murder or whatever else she got off with, and assisting with a rape of a child. But they're trying to get her in some other way, and these sentences are done so that it's really down to the courts and the appeals board, which is, when I talk about these cases, the appeals board is not really, I don't really hold them in high esteem. So Tracy Connolly was first freed, I think, on licence in 2013, but she was recalled about 18 months later in 2015 for breaching her parole for selling pornographic or indecent images of herself online to perverts, really, who because she was notorious, wasn't she, for what she'd done. So obviously some people like that, and that's what she was doing. But because it breached her order, because she actually wasn't allowed to go online either, and then she was then taken back to prison in 2015. She was refused parole for the third time in December 2019. So for now, Tracy Connolly, that's, her done. Stephen Barker. Now this Stephen Barker is the man that they really do think that he was the main instigator in the abuse and in the torture of baby P, and probably also in the murder of it. But and I think this is why he's got more sense. But we must remember that there was other people in this house home at the time, and that was Tracy Connolly, his mother, and also Stephen Barker's brother, Jason Owen, a 36-year-old man, and a 15-year-old girlfriend of his in this property. I think all of them, not singling out any of them, had a real big part that they played in this abuse and torture and murder of this child. So Stephen Barker was sentenced to life in prison for the rape with a minimum sentence of 10 years. He was also sentenced to 12 years for his role in the death of baby P. Because don't forget, he wasn't convicted of murder. He got off with that. And they ran concurrently, so he's got 22 years. Barker had an application for parole turned down in 2017. Jason Owen was also jailed indefinitely with a minimum term of 3 years. The sentences were criticised then as being too lenient, really, these sentences, by all of them. By the NSPCC, the National Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Children, and they were absolutely right in what they said. And the Chief Executive and the Attorney General considered referring them to the Court of Appeal. They wanted really a review, but to tell you the truth, the way our laws are set out, and as I always say with these tariffs and the way we set out and with the sentencing schedules that are put, it's not judges. This is what the sentencing, the maximum terms, minimum terms, they're sort of guidelines. And because none of them was found of murder, there was 3 in this house. He wasn't meant to be in this house, and they couldn't prove any of them done it. There was no evidence in that sort of way of what they done it. So really there was no point going to do that, because there's no way that was going to change anything. So I think all 3 of them actually did try and appeal their sentences, and I think Barker actually tried to appeal both his sentences because he was charged for the rape and then his part in baby P's murder. So Owen's sentence was changed, I think, on appeal, and it was fixed to a 6-year term. He was released in August 2011, but was later recalled to prison, and I think that's where he still is. let's now talk about the background and sum this case up. So I think I want to start with his brother's background. Dysfunctional family, as Tracy Connolly's was, and our own family was dysfunctional. But Stephen Barker, Stephen Barker from very young had this craving to abuse animals, which is quite a clear sign when we look at psychopaths and we look at this sort of behaviour at a very young age. But he continued to do this throughout his time, even when he was with and lived in Tracy Connolly's house. But he wouldn't just torture these animals, breaking their legs. He'd skin them alive. He would, and then kill them. The things this man done to animals was probably what then he started to do to baby P. This man is a sadistic man. His brother, Jason Owen, the older brother, was a paedophile. He was sleeping and having relationships with very, very young girls, and was being chased around the country by police because of that. So these men, these brothers, brothers Grimm really, were sadistic. We now know because Stephen Barker was charged with rape of a 2-year-old that he is also a paedophile. And he also had this fascination with cruelty and killing of animals and torture of animals. So there's some very serious stuff going on there. I think from what we know about this pair, they were predators. They were sadistic in what they did. These are grown men. These were grown men, and we know one of them at least was attacking a child, torturing, abusing, and also doing the same thing to animals. There's other things about these two brothers which will show us a little bit about their character and their background, and this is also a terrible, terrible case. So these two brothers, Jason and Stephen, in 1995, it's shocking really, attacked their grandmother, caused grievous bodily harm, GBH, to their grandmother because they wanted her money. And there was a court case going on. She was having them charged with this. It was meant to be absolutely a terrible assault on their own grandmother. But unfortunately, she died of pneumonia, I think in 1996. And the charges were dropped due to lack of evidence, because when the person dies, they can't give evidence against you. They can't, so there would have been no trial. This was a very serious charge against these two men. A charge that, this is how sick individuals these are, that they would attack by grievous bodily harm their own grandmother for her money. So these are the sort of people we're dealing with. So we don't need to know much about their backgrounds. We know their mindset. We know how they're thinking, and there is no empathy there. I mean, Stephen Barker is a psychopath without a doubt. He has got no empathy, no care. He's got nothing. There is no emotion in him at all. There was no difference to him in an animal and in baby P. He can't distinguish the two. And that's a true psychopath. So now let's talk finally, as we wind this case up, Tracy Connolly and her background. And it's important, her background. This is a woman that allowed her own child, Peter Connelly, aged 17 months at the time of his death, on the 3rd of August 2007, to be over the period of 8 months prior to that date to be abused physically, to be tortured and killed. And she has as much part in that as everybody else. So she will be, you know, and really face contempt in this country, I think, for the rest of her life. She is a woman that sat back and allowed her child to suffer in that way. So when we look now at Connolly's background, she had this absent father, and he was a sex offender actually as well. She had a mother that neglected her. She had another relative that was also lured into a paedophile ring, and I've spoke before about paedophile rings, I think in Mark Tysley's case we talk about paedophile rings. It's serious in this country, you know, this. So she had, she was mixed in with that as well, or the person, you know, I think it was her brother actually, who was 4 years younger and was mixed into this ring. And it was one of the biggest children home scandals, I think, in the late 20th century. Tracy Connolly will not speak about her background. She says that when her father left and everything, the mother, then she had a stepfather that she didn't know was a stepfather for 12 years, and at the age of 12 she was told he was the stepfather. But she doesn't really go into much detail about what else happened to her, because without a doubt things did, but she's chose not to say. I think what shows us a little bit about Tracy's Connolly's personality when it comes to men, because I think 2 weeks before Peter died, her obsession with Barker, this Stephen Barker, this madman, this psychopath, this person that you've watched abused your kid, you've watched him kill animals in your property, and you're writing on a post, you know, how madly in love you are with this man. He's an amazing guy. He's, you know, my fella's nuts, as if it's a good thing what was going on here. And we know that this was in the final couple of weeks of Peter's more serious injuries that were happening to him, where them injuries were getting to the point where he'd have been killed 2 weeks later. Inside Tracy Connolly's home, there was evidence of depravity, really. There was, she'd had these children living in this home. There were feces of animals and humans everywhere on the floor. There was dismembered corpses of rabbits, and on the kitchen table it was flea infested, this property. There was layers of filth on the surfaces, and I think the judge said, you know, this house permitted this, you know, to walk into this house. How could someone in authority, like a social worker that is trained to safeguard children, to look out for the signs of abuse and neglect, miss this? How could they miss it? This home was in such a bad state, the living conditions. These children would have been removed because of that. And I'm not saying that people have messy homes and they lose their children. This is on a different scale. This is where no one in the social services had even bothered to look at what was really going on in this property, even though there's reports after reports after reports from medical doctors that said that this boy was being abused. Tracy Connolly's life was the same life growing up as what she had done to her own children. You know, a lot of people learn or try not to have or give their children what they've had. They want to give them more. Tracy Connolly never had that fault. And I think even her daughter now, as she's been trying to go for paroles and different things, has come out and said, don't let this woman out, she's evil. So you have our own children now saying what she is. And I think this is the case of Baby P, Peter Connelly, Baby A, as it's called in some of the reports and in the cases. So this case, it's hard to end this case because I think it's such a shocking case. But we are in a lockdown, and social services are not being able to get out to families now. This is not an isolated case. And so when we have people out of work and we have people now struggling, as we do, as this recession now is hitting because of this coronavirus, child protection is even more important now than it's ever been before. So this is a very sad case of Peter Connelly, Baby P. So you know what to do. If you found this case interesting, put your thumbs up, hit that thumbs up button. You can do what Lacey puts up, hitting the logo button to subscribe. And thank you to all the subscribers. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I will try and remember that there are new people coming on all the time. So thank you. You can also follow us on Instagram and on Facebook. So until the next time, bye-bye.